Today, we're going to talk more about the dark and dangerous world of industrial espionage. In no time, you'll be rattling off some of the common terminology such as malware, ransomware, vulnerability, and indicators of compromise. Something that you should find particularly interesting and that you will use to complete the challenge set later in this lesson. In this lesson, we're going to explore the concept of industrial espionage, including looking at some of the effects of it and how companies can prevent it. We're going to work with some common ransomware and watch a demo that will help us to understand how to extract an executable file within a captured packet and analyze it to see if the packet contains a malicious executable file. Industrial espionage is the world of illegal and unethical theft of business trade secrets by competitors. It can also be referred to as economic espionage or corporate spying, and is most commonly associated with technology-heavy industries. Industrial espionage is when a business undertakes unethical and illegal intelligence activity to stay ahead of its competition in a specific industry. Some of the most common examples of it include big companies staying ahead of the market by secretly spying on their competitors, or a competitor initiating a targeted campaign to obtain a trade secret, such as an established product where a certain formula, like a recipe, or even a business plan or model is used. Or insider threats. You might recall that we mentioned these previously. This would be a threat conducted by employees, former employees, contractors, or business associates. Basically, anyone with inside knowledge of the company. An interesting example of industrial espionage in the form of an insider threat is the case of a Coca-Cola employee trying to sell the highly classified information to Pepsi in July 2006 for the fee of $1.5 million. When you understand the concept of industrial espionage, it gives you a better understanding of the impact it can have on a company and the economy. Let's explore two common effects of industrial espionage. When a company is found guilty of industrial espionage, it brings its core values into question. Customers or suppliers lose their trust in the company. When a policy is broken or violated, there is also a breach of trust and a lot of investigative action. In most cases, violations like this result in disciplinary action, such as fines or dismissals. How can a company prevent industrial espionage? Companies have a large role to play to prevent this. They need to educate employees, inform them about threats, attacks, and issues with intellectual property, and educate them about the importance of protecting the integrity of the company network. Screen personnel. This is particularly advisable to businesses working with sensitive information. Consider which employees have access to sensitive data and carry out the necessary background checks. Companies also need to be sure employees are happy working in the company. Then secure your network. Businesses should seek the advice from certified information security professionals on implementing appropriate security technologies on their network, such as firewalls, encryption, and intrusion detection. Sometimes they even advise that sensitive data is kept separate from the company network. The threat landscape, also known as the threat environment, is a collection of all the threats in a particular domain or context. In this section, we'll talk about the most prominent malware threat in cybercrime: ransomware. Ransomware as a service, or RaaS, is a relatively new business model for hackers. Similarly to SaaS, these baddie developers sell or lease their ransomware to people who want to perform an attack. RaaS software comes as a distribution kit that allows people with little technical knowledge to launch an attack using malicious spam emails or links to web pages. Let's have a quick look at the biggest ransomware attack in history that took place in 2017. WannaCry is a crypto ransomware network worm that targeted computers operating Microsoft Windows 7 operating systems, encrypting folders, and demanding ransom payments in the Bitcoin cryptocurrency. WannaCry is considered a network worm because it includes its own transport. The transport code scans for vulnerable systems, then exploits the system to gain access and use code injection to install and execute a copy of itself. Between May 12th and 15th in 2017, an outbreak of this crypto ransomware took place, and the WannaCry worm infected hundreds of thousands of individuals and computers in 150 different countries. Scarily, after all this, no arrests were made. Indicators of compromise are evidence of potential intrusions on a host system or network. Basically, some of the things that indicate your system has been attacked and or compromised. There are many examples of potential IOCs. Some common examples include unusual outbound network, anomalies in privileged user account activity, HTML response sizes, a large number of requests for the same file, mismatched port application traffic, and there are a whole lot more. Here is a table of examples of different ransomware and their IOCs. Note the interesting names. The hash for each one would be the way that a network would identify it as ransomware. Note that WannaCry sample hash right at the top of the table. I'm going to stay here for a second as this will be coming up on our challenge later. It's time for action. We are now going to show you how to extract an executable file from a PCAP on Wireshark and analyze it to see if the packet contains a malicious executable file. For this demo, we're going to go back into malware. So in our previous lesson, we went through a captured file where we analyzed the file to see if the file contained a malware. So basically, this demo is going to be a continuation from the previous one. So at the moment, you can see I'm back on my virtual machine. And for this process, I'm going to repeat exactly the same thing that I did before. The difference between this demo and the previous demo is we're going to be analyzing different captured packets. So this demo is just to show students how to extract and identify that a malware was downloaded while connected to the internet. And first, we need to start up our virtual box. And you can currently see I'm in my CyberOps workstation. And you can see that it is running. Okay, guys, so you can see my CyberOps workstation is up and running. And we would be repeating exactly the same steps we did in the previous demo. And if you do remember for the previous demo, we're actually looking for some hashes to identify that the file contains malware. So we want to know the IP addresses while we were actually connected. We also wanted to know the domain name we visited. We want to know the user agent. So what I mean by the user agent, that is the operating system hosting the server. And lastly, we need to check to see the hashes. So with the hashes, we could actually verify to see if this downloaded application was malicious or not. So let's just go into the lab. So at the moment, I'm just going to go into my terminal and I would run a few commands to see the files I have on my terminal. So simply by entering the ls-1. And I can clearly see I still have the file I downloaded from the previous demo, which is the file malicious. So it means I don't need to download the new executable file in a new packet. So to do this, I will be repeating the same stuff we did in the previous demo, but this time with a different file. So I would like to remind every student to simply go through the steps. First, you would need to turn the adapter on the CyberOps workstation. And the reason you need to do this is because you would need to actually access the internet while you're on the CyberOps workstation. First, I'm going to clear my screen. Clear and enter. Now you need to type in a few commands, and the first one that you want to type in is sudo. Like I said in the previous demo, the sudo command would elevate your privilege on the CyberOps workstation. So basically, it means whatever command you type after the command is automatically telling the system you are actually an administrator. So what that means is you would have the rights to be able to do more things while you're on the system because you have administrative rights. So the next thing you do is form a command and you give a space. That is .forward/lab.support.files/scripts/configures_as_dhcp.sh. So what this command does is it tells the system that you need an IP address to connect to communicate out of the LAN, the local area network. So with this, I simply put in this command on the CyberOps workstation. It will automatically activate the DHCP server that you have on the server, on the CyberOps station, to issue an IP address to the machine. So basically, you would be able to connect to the internet while you're actually on a CyberOps workstation. And next, we need to put in our password, and the password is CyberOps. And so at the moment, you can see the configuration on my NIC, which is my network interface card, where I have my network adapter. So at the moment, it's requesting IP information. And at the bottom, you see the IP configuration is successful, which means at the moment I have an IP address connecting out to the internet. So that's basically the first step. And the second step is we need to assess the file we have in the directory of the CyberOps workstation. So to do this, simply we put in some commands. So you're going to type in cdlab.support.files/pcaps. Now basically, just like I said in the previous demo, the cd command is being used to change directory. This means we're changing our directory to this folder. So this directory is where we have our saved captured traffic. And this is where we want to be. And now we can simply use the ls command to see the list of files we have in the folder. And enter. And if you remember from the previous demo, this was the captured traffic. We actually analyzed the check from the malware. We're going to be analyzing the WannaCry downloaded PCIP file. So we would be analyzing this captured packet, and we would try to see what data we could find during our forensics. We would try to see if we have any malicious applications embedded within the captured packet. So how do we get there as we did in the previous demo? We're actually going to repeat exactly the same steps. So we need to actually initialize Wireshark. So type in the command wireshark-gtk wannacry_download_pcap.pcap. So what that means is, since Wireshark is a protocol analyzer tool, Wireshark will be able to analyze the packet and display whatever information we have within the packet. So we just type in WannaCry. And you can see Wireshark is beginning to show us exactly all the traffic we've saved on the packet. And honestly, this is actually a very small packet in a production environment. You could have a larger amount of packets, sometimes up to 1 million or 2 million packet segments in one file. So we can actually see this is just a simple way of showing a student how to analyze network traffic. I can see we actually have the same kind of traffic from the previous demo. And you can see we have the source, we have the destination, and we have the protocols, and you can see other information. So basically at this moment, we're very familiar with the TCP, which utilizes a three-way handshake. We can see the process of the handshake by clicking on the segment. Okay, well, in order not to digress too much, we are after a malicious file. Since we know the common way of actually downloading things on the internet is through a web browser. So this means we would need to filter all of this traffic and only look for HTTP or HTTPS requests. So we simply just go into the field where we have to filter, and we type in the word HTTP. So we can put in some keywords to help filter our search in more depth. When you look at the HTTP on the search field, you can see there is a lot of HTTP syntax to look out for. So we just type in request to enter and apply. So you can see from just the captured packets, we have one HTTP GET request, and it happens to be the request where the user downloaded the malware on the system. So just like you have a web server, a user has to issue a GET request to a web server to connect and collect information from the web server. So basically, you can actually see this is a GET request. So this is actually where we downloaded the malware on our system. And this is the protocol being used. So this tells us we actually were on a browser downloading the malware. So now we have this data. We can simply explore the segments of this packet. So you see the source IP, and you see the destination IP. And if we want to investigate more, like we're currently doing, we can look at a frame. And in a frame, you can see the time. This frame has been captured. If you remember from our notes, we talked about the time protocol. So the network time protocol is actually a very good example of the time protocol. You can see the timestamp when we downloaded a packet. We also see the MAC address of the destination. So what I mean by the address of the destination, I mean the MAC address of whatever web server we actually accessed. So you see this is the MAC address of the destination, and you see the source MAC address. So this means this user has exactly this MAC address. We have seen all of this detail, and we know it has used an IPv4. And like I showed you in the last video, I showed you a sample of seeing all of those things by simply going into the statistics and the protocol hierarchy. Now with this method, we can see more details of the entire captured packet. Now we know for a fact that the HTTP is the protocol we are looking for. We can see this is where we have a lot of volume. Now you can also see there's a lot of bytes being downloaded from the HTTP. And this shows us where we had our download from. So at the moment, we already know we have a downloaded file on the packet segment. We know for a fact that the HTTP is the protocol we're looking for. We can actually see this is where we have a lot of volume. Now you can also see there's a lot of bytes being downloaded from the HTTP. And this shows us where we had our download from. So at the moment, we already know we have a downloaded file on the packet segment, and we can simply right-click on the packet segment and just scroll down to where we have to follow the TPC stream. Now, doing this would actually open up that segment of the packet. So let's explore even deeper. So basically, we can actually see the user agents, which is the operating system of the destination. So this means we access the web server hosted on a Linux distribution. You can also see the IP address of the host and port number. We connected on 6666, so we actually have a lot of gibberish. Now, like I said in the previous demo, if you do remember, I said the reason you need to see all of this gibberish. So this is basically the way Wireshark is trying to show you the contents of the packets. So because this segment contains software and other data, Wireshark shows you the digital representation of the data. So you know that segment contains information or data, and Wireshark has to convert all of that into a form of digital representation of data. So we know now that it contains a lot of information. So we really want to know what kind of software we actually downloaded. Now, if you remember from the previous demo, we analyzed the packet, and we found a piece of software in the packet that was downloaded. And at the end of the demo, we noticed the software was not malicious. So in this demo, we actually want to find out to see if this software in the packet was actually malicious or not. So how do we do this? This is quite simple. Since we already know how to get the HTTP GET request from this, we can actually simply go to the file, knowing that there is an application within the packet. We can simply go to Export Objects. And if you can see, we have a protocol used, which is HTTP. So we're going to be exporting the object as HTTP because that was the protocol that was actually used to get the object in the first place. So we click on that and we can straight away see the name. And it says WannaCry.exe. It's very important for cybersecurity personnel to note the file extension. So what I mean by that is the extension.exe file is a form of software that runs on the Windows operating systems. And just a reminder to students, please do not save this on a Windows laptop. Just to be safe, you have to run this lab on the CyberOps workstation. The reason why that is because if this is actually really a malicious piece of software, you don't want that software to be on your hard disk space, where you have your personal information on your laptop. Rather, you want that piece of software to be within a partition in your laptop. So what that means is with the CyberOps workstation, we already created a partition with the help of visualization. So we can actually save this. So if for any reason something happens and our CyberOps workstation crashes, we can just simply delete the whole partition from our virtual box and reinstall it. And we will be fine. Okay, so we know that we are going to save these on our home directory, and we will save it as WannaCry-file. So now that that is saved, we can actually close this and we can return back to our terminal. Next, we have to check to see if this file is an executable file on the machine. But first, let's check to see if the file actually got saved on our machine. So by running the ls-1 command, we have the file saved on our machine. And this is the file name. So now what do we have to do? We need to put in the command to actually see if this file is an executable file or not. So simply by typing file space WannaCry-file. And you can see I actually got an error because I actually missed the word. So from this, we can see this file is an executable file for a Windows operating system. If you remember in the last demo, I showed a way of digging deeper into a captured file. So now we know this is an executable file before we can simply check to see if this file was actually really malicious or not. So how exactly do we do this? This is how we actually view the movements of WannaCry. So we can simply go into our browser, and on the browser we can go straight to Google. And you simply type the words virus total. So it's actually the first URL, and we simply click on it. Like I said in the previous demo, this is actually the easy way to get to be more familiar with malware. So if you do have a piece of malware and you're unsure that it is actually a piece of malware, you can simply just attach a file to this URL, and it will actually help you to analyze the file to see if the file is malicious or not. So now I'm going to upload a file that I saved. And I need to go to my home directory. And if you remember the file name, it's WannaCry-file. And this is the file, and you can see the file is about 3.5 megabytes. And I click on Open. So instantaneously we see the hashes of the file. So with the hashes, you can detect to see if this file was malicious. And instantaneously we can see that this is a malicious file. So from our notes, we spoke about the Trojans, and we can actually see that this file that the user downloaded off the internet is a malicious file. From it, characteristics were detected as adware. It was a Trojan horse, and it has a lot of characteristics. So basically, we know now that this file is actually malicious, and you can see all the information. We can also see at this moment McAfee is able to detect this as malicious. Microsoft is also able to detect this as malicious, and a lot of companies are able to detect these files as malicious. Unfortunately, some other companies have not been able to detect this. So we can now see which companies are really good at detecting which pieces of software are malicious malware. So this is Alibaba, Acronis, and Microsoft. And these are all the different tech companies. And we can see that they detected this to be the malicious file. And you can go into the details to see more. And now you can see that these are the hashes. So with hashes, we can see if this file is an executable malware or not. So I guess at this point, we can see that this is an executable malware that runs on a Windows operating system. And if you do look more closely, this specific type of malware runs on a 32-bit system. And it is actually being coded with C++. And this is the programming language that was being used to create this piece of malware. So if you scroll down as well, we can see there is a lot of information on the malicious file. So at the moment, we do not need to go more in depth on all of this. We were actually interested in knowing if this file is malicious or not. Now, in upcoming lessons, we will be digging deeper. Using the indicators of compromise, IOCs list in this lesson, visit this website and search the SHA-256 hash function. You may want to share your results with others interested in the field of cybersecurity.